Evening everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So tonight I'm going to be giving you 10 tips on how to make your Fender Stratocaster gig ready. And by that I mean making it as stable as possible so you have the least amount of issues on stage at a gig. So I'll start with the trem. So what some people say is when you buy a Stratocaster, it should be gig ready out of the box. You know, no matter if you've got a floating trem or a decked trem. Now, I've done a few videos on the channel about how to set up a floating trem and the advantages of a floating trem, of which there are quite a few. You know, in my opinion, a floating trem feels nicer. It just feels a little bit spongier. The action feels a bit looser, less stiff. Bends feel nicer. The guitar does feel nicer, I think, with a floating tremolo. That's how it was designed. But you know, unfortunately, a floating trem has got a lot of disadvantages as well. You know, when it comes to playing live, if you snap a string and you've got a floating trem, you're gonna have to swap guitars because the guitar will go out of tune straight away. Also, you can't do stuff like drop D tuning, and actually tuning up the guitar is much more of a pain with a floating trem. So tip number one is deck the trem. Now, you know, the Stratocaster, you know, in my opinion, it's the best guitar in the world. And one of the reasons for that is, you know, just how flexible it is. So you can have a floating trem arrangement, or if you prefer it to be a little bit more, well, a lot more stable, what you would do is basically open up the back plate, tighten up the spring claw uh, until the trem sits flat to the body. Now, the way that I've set it up is because I don't want too much tension on the bridge. Is I've set it up so that when I bend, you know, two semi tone, I say, or even three tones, I don't really want that bridge to move. I want it to just be sort of thinking about moving as I approach that tone, tone and a half. Because if the springs are too tight, the tremolo will be too stiff. So I've got it set up. I think the pedal show have demonstrated how to set up a Strat like this as well. So it's decked, but it's not. The springs aren't too tight, so there's still a bit of play. You can still dive bomb it. So that's how I've set it up, and that's the way I prefer it for gigging. So the second tip I've got is use tens. So most of the time I've used nines on a Strat. But if you go up a gauge to tens, if you haven't already, that'll give you a lot more stability. And by the way, that the deck trem will help with tuning stability. You know, you'll be able to do drop D. When you do sort of like unison bends, the other strings won't go out. So there's lots of benefits to getting the trem decked. Anyway, yes, strings. Yeah. So I know it's tough when you first put tens on, but you know, I've just put them on again after using nines for a good long while. Give yourself about an hour to acclimatise to them on those bends, and then there's no going back really. Having a higher gauge string again will increase stability, tuning stability. So you know, now we've got a deck trem and we've got higher gauge strings. Those two things working together will just give you better stability. What I would also do is invest in some decent strap locks. I mean, these are those Dunlop sort of rubber ones, and they work perfectly. I don't think there's any need, you know, to get those ones where, you know, you take off the strap button and it's got like a sort of metal setup and screws on. I think these are perfect and they're cheap and they don't come off. So yeah, you don't want your strap coming off in the middle of a gig. So get some decent strap locks. That's tip number 3. So tip number 4 is, now last time out with this guitar, you know, it being a single coil, of course. I mean, in these, the pickups on this, which is a Fender Player Stratocaster, they have got quite a bit of oomph to them compared to other Stratocasters, you know, like for example, like a classic Vibe or, you know, Squire. They are high output for single coils. They're not ceramic, they are nickel, but they've got quite a bit of punch to them. But nevertheless, when I was playing it, I just found what they weren't really poking through enough. So what I would say is just increase the height of the pickups a bit. Now, you know, people have said that increasing the height of Strat pickups makes things a bit brighter. It does, but it also gives you more output and gives you a bit more punch. So I would say experiment with your pickup height. Don't have them level with the pick guard, because the lower you go, the more mellow the tone. The higher you go, the brighter and the more output. So experiment with that, because you want to punch through in a live band mix. Okay, so tip number 5. The last video I did was a short, and it was about sympathetic resonance on a Strat. I mean, this affects sort of all Fenders without the second string tree. And I did a video about, you know, sticking a bit of foam behind the nut, which kills vibration. Sympathetic resonance is basically unwanted resonance on the guitar, and it was resonating on the G string because that hasn't got a string tree. It's a common problem with Strats. One fix is you put an additional string tree on. Like I say, I tried the foam. The jury's out on whether that's going to cause tuning issues or not. So what I've actually done is, which I thought was a much better solution in the end, was I've just put a tiny little bit of string. I mean, that's just came off one of my shirts. Just dangling a bit of string. I cut it off and I just wrapped it around, tied a knot on it, and that's cured the ringing behind the nut on the G. So yeah, I mean, you don't really want sympathetic resonance when, you know, you're amplified on stage. It's just a loud whining noise, you know, especially on an open G, and it's just a pain to damp. So get that sorted. Number 6 is the nut. Now, I've had a lot of issues with the nut on this guitar. I mean, I've done videos on this on the channel. Check them out. But in the end, I've ended up installing a Graphtec XL, a Tusk XL nut, which are it's self-lubricated. So you don't need to put graphite on or anything like that. And it was just a million times better than the old nut, you know, with regards to tuning stability. I think that's why the guitar's now resonating a lot more, because it's just the nut is a lot better and it's letting the strings ring. So yeah, but yeah, I would advise, you know, looking at your nut. If it's not, try the trem. It should return to pitch. You know, try big bends. You know, 3 semitone, 4 semitone bends. If they're going out of tune, it's probably your nut. So get the nut sorted out, and you'll be glad you did, basically. Right. Number 7 as well is the string tree. I mean, I know it's just a small thing, but as you can see, I've upgraded this string tree to the sort of, you know, the older style American standard, because the old butterfly one was catching. And you know, these sort of things don't bother you so much when you just, you know, sat in the house, but it's stuff like this that gets on your nerves if you're gigging. So have a look at the string tree, you know, and just any point really, any friction point on the Strat that could possibly cause stability issues. Now, also talking about the string tree, you know, don't forget to lubricate that. So I know my nut is self-lubricating, but you know, put a bit of, I don't know, Vaseline or graphite just behind those as well, just those contact points, just to make sure they're slippery. And the same for the saddles as well. Okay. Number 8, not small thing, but it's worth doing, the selector switch on a Strat. you know, notorious for just popping off. So what I've done is you just get one of those. See if I've got. Oh, I haven't got it in hand. Those wire cutters, you know, the ones that you use to cut your guitar strings. Take it off and just squeeze that until it makes a ridge, and then push the selector switch back on, and it'll never come off ever again. So it's just something that can happen, which is annoying. So just get it sorted before it happens. Number 9, similarly, the jack socket. Now, I think these are a complete pain on a Strat because the nut in there is quite hard to get to, so it frequently comes undone. So just make sure you've got the proper spanner and get it on tight so that you don't have to keep coming back and retightening it, which is a pain. Strats are a pain, but they are brilliant. And number 10, the saddles. Now, I've upgraded these saddles. They did come with the sort of the bent steel variety, which I hate. And when I decked this trem, I realised that I couldn't get the bent steel saddles high enough. So what I've done is I've spent £10 on some block saddles, you know, and they've just got much more travel vertically. So I can deck the trem and float using these saddles. I could never do that with the bent steel. And as I said before, put some lubrication where the string contacts the saddles. I think Fender advised 3-in-1 oil, but whatever, anything that's going to lubricate that to improve tuning stability. So that was a quick one, and there was lots of stuff there. But yeah, Strats are brilliant. You know, the floating trem sounds beautiful. You know, you've got that up bend and you've got that slinky playability. But if you're going to be gigging, you don't want to have that to deal with. You want to make sure it's as stable as possible so that, you know, the Strat can really shine live. And for that, I think you need to deck the trem and just make sure all of the possible issues that you could have, you've sorted them before you go, because you don't want to get those issues in the middle of a gig. Anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for liking, thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Ta-ra.